Today, the theme of our webinar is using TradeLog for 2016 trader tax reporting. So we're going to specifically be talking about using the software to create your tax reporting for 2016. We could get into a whole lot of other topics with TradeLog, but we're going to try to stay focused on this, and especially in helping you either get started for the first time, or if you haven't touched the software in a while, some refresher on what you need to do to get up and running again and to complete your tax reporting for 2016. As I mentioned earlier, we are recording this webinar, so if you have to leave early, we will send an email of the link to everyone who registered as soon as it's been posted online. As far as Q&A, you do have the ability to submit questions using the settings in Zoom webinar. If this is the first time you've joined us, you can adjust your audio settings if you need by clicking on the audio settings button. The Q&A button will allow you to submit questions. As I mentioned, because of time constraints, we're going to be really restricted in how much time we can spend answering questions, but you can submit those, and later I'll show you how to contact our support team directly as well. And then I will be, we do have a chat function, but I've disabled that because we have the Q&A. We'll use that if you have any questions. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping on using Zoom webinar. If you have problems with the audio throughout the webinar, just check your audio settings. There is also an option to be able to call in on the phone if you're not getting the best quality, so that's available as well. So let's get started by talking about 2016 tax year and some things to know beyond TradeLog software, specifically when it comes to broker reporting to start. As many of you know, if you've been trading and filing taxes over the past several years, we've been involved in a long process over the last 4 or 5 years, especially with the new 1099-B changes that have come about with the cost basis reporting requirements for brokers. Well, 2016 is the final phase of that legislation and what's required for brokers. Not a huge significant change in the 1099, but specifically what's required for brokers for 2016 tax year is to report details for more complex fixed income instruments, or as the IRS calls them, debt instruments. This would include things like capital appreciation bonds, convertible bonds, some of your inflation-indexed fixed income securities, stepped rate bonds. So a lot of bonds that are involved. Again, these are more complex fixed income instruments. So if you do trade in those securities, you're going to see more details reported on those on your 1099-B this year, as well as brokers are required to make more adjustments when it comes to some of the interest and principal that is distributed on some of those instruments. So that's what's new. I think for the majority of you who are TradeLog users, and just knowing kind of the type of activity that we've seen over the years in trading for TradeLog users, you probably won't see a whole significant change in your 1099-B because of this. So probably won't be earth-shattering or significant in that regard. But that's the change for 2016, and this is the last year of significant changes based on the legislation. So hopefully after this, the 1099-B will be a little more stable, and we'll see consistent reporting from brokers in the years to come. Now, what about taxpayer reporting? Well, again, there's no significant changes when it comes to the IRS Form 8949. So that's the report that you as a taxpayer are usually concerned about if you're using cash basis accounting. So the 8949 is pretty much the same. The rules are the same as they always have been for taxpayer reporting. And of course, if you've attended some of our webinars before, or you've read on our website, you do know that there are different rules for taxpayers than there are for brokers when it comes to things like wash sale adjustments and reporting your trade activity. Those rules are all the same. We're in the same boat as an active trader. Especially if you have multiple accounts, you have to have a program like TradeLog to really get you the reporting with the adjustments that you need. I thought I'd mention a few filing deadlines, and there is a little bit of a change this year. Hopefully you know this if it affects you. March 15th is the first filing deadline. This is for S-Corps and now also for partnerships. March 15th is now the deadline for tax returns or extensions if you're filing for an extension. So the partnership thing is changed with this tax year. April 18th is, of course, the big day for the deadline for individual tax returns or extensions. I don't know if we're ever going to get back to the old April 15th because of the weekends and holidays. It seems to constantly be past the 15th, but this year it's April 18th, and we'll take those few extra days. So then, of course, if you do file for an extension and you're filing as an S Corp or a partnership, then your return will be due September 15th. And then October 16th is the final deadline for individual extension returns if you file. So those are some key dates to note if you haven't yet done so, and those days are getting closer and closer. Now, what's new with TradeLog Software when it comes to the 2016 tax year? Well, one question that some of you may be asking already is, can I use TradeLog for 2016? Is the software ready? Yes, it is. We actually released version 16 a while back ago because there are no real significant changes for taxpayer reporting. There's nothing tremendously new in the software, but it is released and you can use version 16 for 2016 tax reporting. So that's going to give you final reports that are correct for 2016 tax year. Now, something that's brand new, and I mean brand new, it was just released today, but we're going to talk about it because it's a great little tool that makes TradeLog easier at tax time, is the new checklist button. So if you happen to use TradeLog today and you got the latest update, you might have noticed the checklist button on the toolbar. Later, I'm going to show you how that will make the year-end process easier. If you want to know more about what's different with TradeLog in the last year and a half, especially when it comes to tax files and how TradeLog is structured, we had a webinar last week. You can check out the recording of that on our website. It's entitled How to Use TradeLog Software, Newest Features and Getting Started. And I'll show you later at the end how to find the recordings of our past webinars. So you can check that out if you want to learn more about getting started with TradeLog and kind of an overview of the newest features. But today we want to really focus on using TradeLog for 2016 tax year. So let's talk about a few important things to get started with. Number one is to make sure you have an active subscription of the software. Because if you don't have a subscription, then you're going to have problems. Number one, updating the software, but two, running your reports, being able to import, use the software, all of that. Now, some of you have the free trial version of the software, and you can use the free trial to do almost everything that we're going to talk about today, except for the end tax year process and running your final tax reports. You can't do that in the free trial version, but you can do a lot of the other work that I'm going to show you today. So if you're still checking out the software, you can use the free trial until the end of that 30 days or when you're ready to finalize your tax year. Now, once you've activated your subscription, another thing to make sure is that the software is up to date. And this is important because sometimes we've learned that some users will open the software, and when you open TradeLog, it'll prompt you and tell you if there is a new update available. But sometimes people skip that because they think, well, I don't want to mess anything up, or I don't want to have to hassle with that. But we always recommend using the most current version that has been released, it's been tested, and that way you have all the new features. And sometimes there are little bugs that work in, or there could be a change maybe with your particular broker reporting. So the newest update's going to account for that. So make sure your software is up to date. And I'll show you if I open up TradeLog. Let me close out of this file. When you open the software, you can always go to the Help menu and click on Update. And that's going to check and see if you have the most recent update, and I'm currently up to date. So there's no update available for me. So that's just something, if you're not sure and you want to check, you can do that and make sure your software is up to date before you get started. The third important thing that we want to talk about getting started is to follow the Quick Start Guide, also called Getting Started in our user guide. This is important because in the Quick Start Guide, we outline 8 steps involved in the tax year process with TradeLog. And these 8 steps are essentially the same every year if you use TradeLog for your tax reporting. So you might have used, I know a lot of you said earlier that you used TradeLog last year for 2015 tax reporting, and that's fantastic. You might have used the Quick Start Guide, but sometimes ones think, well, I used the Quick Start Guide now, that's just for first-time users, but that's not the case at all. You can use the Quick Start Guide every single year, and in fact, we encourage you to do that. Let me show you a little tip here. I'm going to split my screen. If you have a larger screen, this is helpful when you're using TradeLog too. You might find it helpful to just open the user guide and split that on your screen. That way you can follow along. You can hit the F1 button on your keyboard when you have TradeLog open. That's going to open the user guide. From the welcome page, you can click on Quick Start Guide, and that's going to go directly to it as well. So here you find Getting Started. And this is the Quick Start Guide. It's the 8 important steps. So this is really important. And basically, through the rest of our webinar today, we're going to just work through these 8 steps. And I'm going to show you some of the key parts of these steps, walking you through. And I'm also going to highlight a few little tips and best practices that will help you out along the way. So this is very important, and you want to make sure and follow the Quick Start Guide. If you follow those 8 steps, it's usually going to answer a lot of the questions and problems that you may have. So let's get started. Good course, here again is a list of all 8 steps in the Quick Start Guide, and we're going to start with step number 1, which is creating a new file or locating last year's TradeLog file. So let me go back to TradeLog, because we are going to really work in the software through most of this. And what I want to do to start is show opening the last year file, and then we'll talk about creating a new file. So for those of you who use TradeLog for 2015 tax reporting, what you want to do is find the tax file that was created for 2016. When you closed out the year, you did the year-end process for 2015, TradeLog would have created a 2016 tax file for you to use for this tax year. So hopefully you didn't delete that or anything like that. You should have that file. A lot of times when you open up TradeLog, you're going to find your recently opened files listed right here on the welcome page. So if you have used the 2016 file in the past year, you created it, it might be listed. If it's not there, just click on Open Existing File. And TradeLog, by default, stores the data files here in the Documents folder, and you can find a subfolder for TradeLog, and this is where you're going to find all of your files. So if I go in here, I see my 2016 file, demo user. That's the one that I'm going to open up. Your file is going to be named based on whatever taxpayer name you put in for 2015. So if your name's John Doe and you put that in 2015 John Doe, you're going to find a 2016 John Doe. And then TradeLog is going to continue to just roll through that cycle in the future years. So that's what you want to be looking for, is your 2016 data file. Now, if you have problems and you can't find your file, or you think maybe you deleted it, you can contact our support team. If you do have your 2015 file, we might be able to help you get started again. So don't just start over. If you use TradeLog in 2015 and you can't find your file, just reach out to us and we'll give you some tips, or we'll try to help you out if you do have your 2015 file. And that way, you don't have to start from scratch, because that's going to be too much work for you. So that's how you find your file if you use TradeLog in the past year. But let's now talk a little bit about step 1 for new users. I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the instructions for step 1. Here we see create new file, locate last year's file. So there's 2 options that it gives instructions to. If you used TradeLog last year, we already followed those steps. We're going to now look at if we are using TradeLog for the first time. This is the first year. Then we want to go ahead and click on New User. Now, once we click on this, it opens up the instructions, and you can just read through and follow the instructions. I know none of us really like to read the instructions, but doing this is going to really help you understand what's involved in using the software correctly. Now, the first step is to create a new file. I can either go up to the File menu and click New, or I can click on the welcome screen, Create New File. What's very important is that you fill out this information correctly. Tax year. This is not the calendar year. This is the tax year that you're filing for. So we're talking about 2016 tax year right now, not 2017 tax year. So we want to create a 2016 tax year file. And then next we want to fill in our taxpayer name. Now we can choose a couple different options. If this is a personal individual return, which is filed under a social security number, you can choose that. If this is a corporate return being filed under an EIN, then you can change that and put a corporation name or your S Corp, whatever name you're going to use there. And you can optionally put in an EIN as well. If this is not a file for tax reporting, which is pretty rare, but if you're just creating a different file, click None. But for most people, this is going to be a personal file, and you can just go ahead and put your name in here. I'm just going to put Jason. My last name is going to be Sample today, so I put that in. The Social Security number field is optional. If you include this, the data is encrypted in your file, and what we do is we'll put that Social Security number on the actual tax reports, so make it easier for filing. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can leave it blank, and you'll just have to fill in that Social Security number yourself. So we can do that. If you want to set a password, that option is here as well. You can learn more about that in our user guide or our past webinar. Once you've set up the file, I recommend you keep this location where we save it in the Documents TradeLog folder. This way, TradeLog's, all your stuff's kept together. But if for some reason you have another specific location you want to store your data files on, you can choose to select a folder and change the location. But we recommend, best practice, keep it in this file. That way, it's easy to find things and back things up. So once I've filled that information out, I click OK. Now it wants me to confirm that the name I entered is my taxpayer name, because this is actually going to print on the tax reports. So don't put some funky little name there. Make sure and put your taxpayer name. If you are filing jointly, you don't have to put both names on there on your joint tax return. You can just put a primary name, or you can put both. It's totally up to you. I'm going to click yes. Now I did leave the Social Security number blank, so it's going to warn me that if I can do that, but it's not going to put it on my reports, of course, so I can change that later if I need to. Once you click OK and you've created a new file, now we come to the account setup. And this is something important when it comes to TradeLog, is you want one data file for one taxpayer. So, or if you're filing jointly, it's going to be for the two of you because it's one tax return. So on this data file, we want all of our brokerage accounts stored within the one file. You don't want a separate file for each broker account, because later when it comes to actually doing those tax calculations, especially wash sale adjustments, that needs to be done across all accounts. This also includes non-taxable accounts. So if you have an IRA, a non-taxable IRA, you might think, well, why do I need to put that in TradeLog? Well, there's two reasons. Number one, the IRS does have some specific rules about wash sales and IRAs. So if you're trading the same security in a taxable and non-taxable account, you may be affected by some wash sale rules. TradeLog is going to account for that. Also, it doesn't hurt to put your IRA into TradeLog, because you can also run the performance reporting and some of the analysis reports on your IRA account. So why not put it in there? Even if you don't have wash sale adjustments, you can go ahead and do that. So with the account setup, what we need to do first is select the broker. And you want to choose the import filter. These are supported brokers that TradeLog supports. So you can scroll through this list. I'll show you later where you can find a list online of all of our supported brokers. I'm going to choose Fidelity because the account that I'm going to use here is a Fidelity account. And you can also choose the default import method. There's different methods for importing with each broker. So with Fidelity, we have our Broker Connect. We also have where I can download a file and manually kind of go through the process, downloading and then importing that into TradeLog. I'm going to just choose Broker Connect because that's my preferred method. It's usually the easiest with a broker if we support that. These checkboxes, you can usually just leave blank. We will automatically check those if they are required for your broker. Otherwise, don't check them unless someone in our support team directs you to do so, because you might mess something up later. And then we can give our account a name. Now, by default, TradeLog is going to throw in the broker name, but you can go in and change this, especially if you have multiple accounts with the same broker. It's going to get confusing if they're all called Fidelity. So best practice that I know some users do is they'll put like the last 4 digits of the account number on there, and that way it helps them remember when they look at the tabs which account this is. And you'll see later where this shows up in TradeLog. And of course, you want to make sure and choose the type of account. If you're using regular cash basis accounting, if it's a non-taxable IRA, or if you've elected mark-to-market accounting method, then for this account, then you want to select that. So most of you are using regular cash basis accounting, so we're just going to kind of focus on that mainly today. So we're going to keep that selected because this is a cash basis account. Now, as soon as TradeLog creates your first account, it automatically opens the baseline positions wizard. And this goes into the next step in our user guide. So I'll scroll through here these instructions. Again, you can read through all of these instructions about the steps that we just talked about, and we go into some more details about these different selections and how to choose them. Get to the bottom, I can click next step, and notice we go into enter baseline positions. So we're now at step 2. I want to pause here for a moment before we talk about baseline positions and just kind of go over a few key things we just talked about. Number 1, if you used TradeLog in the past, used it for 2015 tax year, you need to, in step 1, follow the instructions for locating last year's file. You don't need to create a new file if you used TradeLog last year. Now, if you skipped a year, maybe you used TradeLog for 2014 tax reporting, but you didn't use it for 2015, and now you want to use it for 2016, I recommend contacting our support team because they may want to discuss with you some options. Because if you just create a brand new file, then any wash sale deferrals that you had in your 2014 tax year are gone. TradeLog doesn't know about that information. So you might want to contact us if for some reason you skipped a year, and we can help assess your situation. Probably send us the last file, the last tax year file that you did use TradeLog for, and we can kind of help figure things out. Now, when you ended the tax year for 2015, that's what created your 2016 file. So that's what you want to locate. And a little warning here when it comes to files, don't rename your file. Sometimes people go into Windows Explorer and they start renaming their file. If you change the tax year or you change the taxpayer name on that file, that can really mess things up. And so we'll maybe talk a little more about that if we have some time later. For those of you who are using TradeLog for the first time, just follow the instructions for creating a new file and make sure that the taxpayer name you put in is what's going to be used on your reports. You have one tax file for all accounts that are controlled by the taxpayer. So that would include any IRA accounts that you put in there. So now let's go and talk about entering baseline positions, because this is a critical step for first-time users of the software. So those of you who used TradeLog in 2015, you can take a mental breather for a minute, because you don't have to follow this step. But if it's the first time you are using TradeLog, you do need to enter baseline positions. Basically, this tells TradeLog where to start. We need to know at the beginning of the tax year, what positions did you own? And then we can take the rest of the information and we can get it from your broker. So in order to enter baseline positions, you have to have your December broker statement for the previous tax year. So keep in mind, we're working on 2016 right now. So we would need our December 2015 broker statement for the account, and that's going to tell you the positions that you held open in that account as of December 31st. And that's the information you're going to need. This step's really critical, so it is a little tedious sometimes, and it's probably the one step that new users will say the most, oh, I hated entering baseline positions. But once you do this, the good news is you don't have to come back and do this every year. It's a one-time thing. So you want to make sure you do it right. And that's why you want to follow the instructions in our Quick Start Guide, because we're going to help make sure you do it right, and that way you don't have to go back and fix things later. The best way to enter your baseline positions is using the wizard. And this opens automatically as soon as you create the new account with your file in TradeLog. If for some reason you have to close out of the baseline positions wizard, this is what our TradeLog file looks like. We've got the account. You notice it's empty. There's no data in here. So I can go back to the baseline positions wizard by going to the add menu, and I can also manually enter baseline positions. So if you really want to do that, you can, and we give you instructions on how to do that in our Quick Start Guide, but I'm going to show you how to use the wizard because it's a whole lot quicker. So when you click on the wizard, it opens up, and again, there's some instructions you can read through. It's going to tell you which broker statement you need for this account and what you need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click begin. And first thing it asked me to do is to check my statement to see if I have positions that are listed holdings as of December 31st, and I do. So I'm going to hit step 2. If you don't have any holdings as of December 31st, you can go straight to step 3, but that's not the case for me. So now what I have to do is tell TradeLog what positions I had open in as of December 31st, 2015 for this account. And I'm going to type these in real quick. I have 3 positions. The first one is a stock position for ticker AGN. I had 200 shares. I'm going to add that to the list. Next, I have position TNA, which is actually an ETF. So I'm going to look that up. And again, I'm going through this really quick. Our instructions explain more about how to fill out these fields if you're not sure. So I had 400 shares of TNA, and the next I have an option, so I want to enter that. And this is a short position for AGN. I had one contract, the multiplier is 100, and this is a January 15, 2016 call. The strike price is 325. So once I've entered all that information in, now I've got my 3 positions. So this matches up with the broker statement that I'm looking at right now on paper. So these are the 3 holdings as of December 31st. Now I go down and I click on the next button. And what TradeLog is going to do now is it's going to check for any trades that were pending settlement, because these aren't going to be listed. So I'm going to click on my Fidelity Import button, and I don't want to show all of you my username and password, so that's why I'm going to drag this off, and I'm going to, yes, I do trust some people, but no, I don't trust all of you. So that's why I'm not giving you my username and password. I'm going to enter this in, and this is using Broker Connect. So with Fidelity is one of the many brokers that we have that supports Broker Connect. And TradeLog is going to use my login information that I enter, and it's going to directly connect with my account. I just need to make sure I put my account number in here. And once I do that, I click on OK. And what TradeLog's now doing is it is going to go out and it's going to get that trade history that it needs to check for any positions that were pending settlement as of December 31st. So now you see it's given me a revised list. So these are actually all the positions that I had opened as of December 31st, 2015. So next I need to go on and find the actual prices and the date that I opened or acquired these positions. So I'm going to click the Find button, and now it's complete. So pretty simple with the baseline positions wizard. Now, like I said, you can enter all this information one at a time if you want, and we give the instructions on how to do that. But I really recommend using the wizard if you can, because it's going to make it a whole lot easier. So now I have all of the positions that I opened. You'll notice it found the date, the actual date that I opened these positions. It's got the price, the commissions, everything in there. So now I'm ready to move on with this particular account. Now, if you have more than one broker account, then what you'll need to do is go up here and click the plus button on the account tabs, and that'll allow you to add an account. So you can go in and set up, like I have an Interactive Brokers account, so I can go in there and do the same process of setting up that account. It's going to go through the baseline positions wizard again. Same process. You want to do that for each account that you have. Once you've created all of your broker accounts, you have all your baseline positions entered, now you're ready to move on to the next step. So what is the next step? Well, let's pull up our user guide. I have to skip through here the instructions. We just use the wizard. And I'm going to go to the next step, which is importing our trade history. So to show you importing trade history, I'm going to go ahead so I don't have to do my baseline positions on my Interactive Brokers account, which are a lot more comprehensive than my Fidelity account. Here I've gone ahead and set up another file. This has all of my baseline positions for my 2 accounts. In fact, this is not baseline positions. This was a file that I used. I did my 2015 tax reporting. I ended the tax year, and this was the 2016 file. So you'll notice it already has January trades for 2016 imported. That's part of the process we'll talk about later. So TradeLog created this file for me, and now I can go ahead and start importing my trade history into this file. And step 3 has the instructions for doing that. So I want to go ahead and click on my individual broker accounts. And one of the things I need to make sure and do, if I'm using cash basis accounting, I need to import all the way through January 31, 2017. That's important because for wash sale adjustments, you have to have the first 30 days of trade history in the new tax year. So you need January 2017 in your 2016 tax year file, even though sometimes people think, well, that doesn't make sense. Now, if you're using mark-to-market accounting, if you elected that with the IRS, then you only need to import through the end of the year up to December 31st, and then TradeLog will do the mark-to-market adjustments and you'll move on. And we explain all of that again in our quick start guide on how to do that process. So I want to go ahead and import my trade history, I'm going to go first to my Fidelity account, and you'll notice there's a Fidelity import button. So I can click on that, and this is a little similar to what I just showed you. Now in this case, it allows me to select the import method. I'm going to use Broker Connect. Again, here I would put in my username, my password, and my account number for this particular account. And that would allow me then to, TradeLog will connect with my account and get all that information and import it. Now your login information, it's encrypted and stored in TradeLog, so no one else can get that unless they are able to open your TradeLog file. And even then, the password, once you type the password, you'll see you can't even view the password, so it's encrypted. So basically, that's the limitation. There's different methods of importing for each broker, and you can go to our website and you can check out those instructions. Also, we link directly in the instructions to our broker import matrix. So here's a list of all the brokers that we support, and you can actually click on the individual brokers. If your broker is not supported, we do have some other methods of importing using an Excel or text file. So sometimes if you can get your trade history, you can use that. So that's a question that some of you may have already asked. If your broker is not supported, how to import. So once I enter the information here, I'm going to again take this off because I don't want you to enter that, and I'm going to fill this out, and we'll import our trade history. Now, with some brokers, you will have to actually do multiple imports because the brokers may limit how many trades you can get for a period. Like they might limit you to a 90-day period or 3 months, 6 months, it varies. With brokers, if we're able to get the full tax year, we'll try to get that all at once. So I'm going to go over here. I just imported Fidelity, and you'll notice that if you watched it, asked me to confirm that I want to save the records. And I went ahead and imported all the way through January 20th was the last day that I had trades in 2017. So I've imported all of that. Now I can do the same thing with Interactive Brokers. If I'm using Broker Connect, it's a little bit different with Interactive Brokers because they use an API. So instead of putting my account credentials, because if you have an IB account, you know it's like getting into Fort Knox to get into your account. So first you have to go in and set up your account to accept TradeLog in the API, and then you get a token and a query ID, and this is what you'll enter into your TradeLog software. So once I've got to redo that. So once I've done that, I can then import the full year into IB. And as I mentioned, this is a much bigger account, so I have 6,000 some records now. And again, I imported all the way through, this was January 27th is the last trade date. So you want all of that trade history, including January of the next tax year, unless you're doing mark-to-market. If it's mark-to-market, you can stop at December 31st. And we give those instructions in the user guide on what to import and how far to import to. So you want to go through that whole process, get all of your trade history imported for all of your accounts. Now, I think someone had asked a question about what if you opened another account mid-year? Maybe you opened a new brokerage account or a new account with the particular broker. Well, then you can just create that account. And since it's a new account, if you didn't transfer anything into that account, you just started trading, you can just start importing from the first date that you open that account onward. Now, if you transferred positions into that account, either from another account or maybe it came from a family member, a trust, or who knows what it was. If you transferred positions in, then you want to check out our instructions in our user guide on transferring open positions. And we have some tools to help do that. But check that out in the user guide. You can just do a search for transfer positions, or if you're having problems with it, contact our support team and we can point you to the instructions that will help you with that process. So let me go over to my little PowerPoint slide here and just talk for a moment a few key things about importing trade history. Again, we talked about how far to import to. January 31st for cash basis, December 31st for mark-to-market. You can do past December 31st with mark-to-market if you want to, but I recommend if you're ready to do your tax reporting right now, just import up to December 31st and then close out the tax year, which we'll show you later. If you need help with importing, go ahead and check the instructions for your individual broker. Like I said, each broker is a little bit different on their import methods. So I showed you just two, Fidelity and Interactive Brokers, and we have many other brokers that we support. If you get any errors or there's a warning message that shows up during the import process, then don't ignore it. Stop and get the help you need from our technical support team. And let me show you, for example, an error that sometimes occurs. And to do this, I'm just going to break something. Yeah, I'll just delete a record. So negative shares error is sometimes an error that people will get, especially right after importing trades. And what this means is that there are more trades, more shares that are being closed than you have open for whatever security or position. In this case, it's ticker CPLP because I just deleted one of my open positions for that. So this is a problem. You can't sell more than or close more than what you have open. So it needs to be fixed. Unfortunately, sometimes users will just hit the escape button and try to keep ignoring this. Now, every time you do something in your account, it is going to pop back up and it's going to try to remind you have an error. So don't ignore that. Go ahead and fix it. We give some instructions here. There's a help button you can click on, and it actually gives you a checklist of common causes for negative share errors, so you can do that. Or if you can't figure it out, then go ahead and reach out to our support team and get help. But don't ignore the problem, because you can't do an accurate profit and loss calculations if you have negative share errors. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the record, or undo the record that I deleted. And now we can move on to step 4. We've imported all of our trade history. We don't have any error messages popping up. So the next step in our quick start guide is verify open positions. And this is important because it gives us a chance to make sure that everything in TradeLog is matching up with what actually happened according to our broker. And so to do this, a process that TradeLog's used since it first came out in 1999 is verifying open positions at the end of the year. And what you're going to need for this is you're going to need your broker statement for December 2016. So this is the last month of the tax year. And that broker statement, again, will list any positions that were held open as of December 31st, 2016. And we're going to compare that with TradeLog to make sure it matches up. So again, we have the instructions to explain it, and you need to do this one account at a time. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's not in these instructions because it was just released today. The new checklist button is a great little feature that's going to kind of be like a best practice for us today in doing the following steps with verifying open positions. You could go up here and click on the open button, and this gives you the open position window, and you can click year end. That's what our instructions tell you. But another way to get to that is to do the checklist. And this year-end checklist needs to be completed for each account. So you notice it has a couple of steps, and the third one is verify year-end open positions. Part of this process, and we explain it in the instructions for step 4, applies if you traded options. So if you trade options, and I know many of you do, you also need to check if you had any expired options or exercised options, because these are going to show up. So I'm going to show you, for example, if I click on the open button and I have year-end open positions, you'll notice here that I've got some option positions that are in the tax year. In this case, these expired in March and April. And these need to be expired because they're past the expiration date. So the easy way to do that is just to go up here and click the Expire Options button. Or if I'm in the checklist, I can just click on the Expire Options button right here, and that's going to go ahead and do all of my options that are expired and close that out. So now it gives me a list of my year-end open positions. If I go back to the checklist, I can go ahead and check that off. Next is if I had any exercised options. What I need to do is make adjustments for any exercised or assigned options. So if I click the button, TradeLog is going to search and find if I had any, and I did. It's pulled up one here. So here is an option that it found that appears to be exercised and assigned. And so I can just go down here and click the exercise button, and you notice TradeLog makes the adjustments that are required for tax reporting for an exercised option. I'm going to go ahead and click yes to save, and now that step is completed. So I've completed those first 2 steps. Again, this is all explained in the Quick Start Guide as well. I went through it pretty quick, especially when it comes to exercised options. If you have a lot of options trading and you do have a lot of options that got exercised, you might want to check out our specific instructions for that function, and there's a link in the Quick Start Guide if you traded options for option exercise assigned, so you can check that out. But now we can get to where we're actually verifying our year-end open positions. And again, using the checklist, I can just hit the little hot button that goes straight to open positions. And this is the open positions window. And I want to go up here and click the button to view year-end open positions, not all. You'll notice it has as of December 31st, 2016. So these are the trades that I had opened in this account as of December 31st. So what I want to do is take my broker statement and I want to compare to make sure it matches up. If something doesn't match, either TradeLog shows something open that my broker doesn't or vice versa, then that's an indication that maybe there's a problem somewhere. So you need to dig a little deeper, and we actually give some suggestions here at the end of these instructions. For example, was there a stock split, a merger, a spinoff, a ticker name change? Those are some things that might adjust it. Also, if you used match lots with your broker, maybe you sold a specific lot of a security, then you might need to make adjustments for that as well. So go ahead and verify your open positions. Once you've done that, oh, and a little tip I'll give you, you can print this off. I find it really helpful myself. I print this sheet off. It gives me a little report that I can then just cross them off as I'm comparing with my statement. And that's a lot easier than trying to look between a computer screen and the statement to do. So that way I have them all crossed off on the report. Once you've done that, we can check the box that we've verified year-end open positions. I want to do the same thing for my other account, my IB account. I'm going to expire all of my options first. Once I've done that, I can go in and see if there's anything to be exercised assigned. I do not have any options that need those adjustments, so I can mark those 2 things off. And then I want to check my year-end open positions. I've already done this, by the way. That's why I'm going real quick. So once I've confirmed everything looks correct, I can check that off. So now both of my accounts, I've completed step 4, which is verifying year-end open positions. So just again, a couple of tips with this. Use the new checklist button. That'll help you to do those important functions for expiring options, exercise and assign for options, as well as verifying year-end open positions with your broker statement. If something's not right, you're getting an error, your year-end open positions aren't correct, they're not matching, get the help you need. If you need to contact us, great, contact our support team, but get the help. Don't ignore it, because it could mean that there's something incorrect in the trade history. There could be trades that are missing. For some reason, your broker didn't include them in the trade history. This simple step of verifying open positions finds like 99% of problems that might have occurred in the trade history. So it's very important, and you don't want to skip it. So now step 5 is reconciling the 1099B proceeds. I'm going to go back to TradeLog in a moment, but just to highlight, what's the purpose of this? Some of you may be wondering, if you've checked out our information on our website, you know the difference between the 1099B and your reporting requirements, Form 8949. And you may know that your 1099Bs cannot be used for accurate trader tax reporting in many circumstances. So you might wonder, why are we reconciling the proceeds? Well, again, this is a step that helps to ensure that TradeLog's data is accurate. We look at the gross proceeds that your broker's reporting. We compare it to the gross proceeds of the trades in TradeLog, your sales, or excuse me, your proceeds. Make sure I say this right. And by doing that, we can compare and see if there's anything that's really off. And you want to remember the broker rules are different, so there might be discrepancies, especially if you have options trades or you report Section 1256 contracts, because we've learned that brokers have some quirky little things when it comes to options and Section 1256. So there might be discrepancies because of that. And if you don't receive a 1099B, I'm going to show you, all you have to do is override the reconciliation so you can skip that process. So many of you, if you have elected mark to market for an account, Oftentimes your broker, they don't provide a 1099-B because they don't need to, because it's irrelevant really when it comes to mark-to-market accounting. You don't have wash sale adjustments. Everything's handled differently. So I'm going to show you that here in TradeLog. Now just keep in mind, I'll show you when I run the report too, this report, this reconciliation report, does not get sent to the IRS. So don't print it out and send it to the IRS. They don't want it. They don't care. This is for your use to verify your history in TradeLog. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the next step in our user guide. Here's step 4. Again, we give you lots of information. We explain some of the challenges that you may have. It is difficult at times to get your 1099 to reconcile perfectly with TradeLog. So if you have a discrepancy, don't be shocked, because it does happen, and we can help you. Our support team can help you identify maybe the cause of that discrepancy. It might not fix anything because the 1099-B just might be different, but this is the steps to do. So next, what we want to do, I'm going to go to the checklist again. I told you this was a nice button, makes it really easy. And you'll notice the 4th thing we need to do before we can end the tax year is reconcile 1099. I can click on the button, reconcile 1099-B, and that's going to go straight to that report. Now the first thing it does, TradeLog asks, well, it notices here that for fidelity, there's some check boxes that you're going to see on the next page. We want to check these for you to make sure you do it correct. So basically, we're helping you out. So typically, your answer is going to be yes, unless you have a really good reason to do otherwise. These are the 3 check boxes I'm talking about. So brokers have a few little quirky things they do, and some brokers are different than others. So we can customize our reconciliation report to match up to what your broker is doing. And so we read this automatically for brokers that we know about, and we go ahead and check it. So you don't need to change anything with these check boxes unless our support team instructs you to do so. All you need to do is get the gross proceeds number from your 1099-B. Now, I could do a whole webinar about how to get gross proceeds off a 1099-B. We don't have the time to do it right now, but you can click the Get More Info, and that's going to take you into our user guide. Actually, it's going to pop up some information, and then it's going to take you to our user guide as well as our online tutorials, where we explain more about finding gross proceeds from your 1099-B. Some brokers are easier than others. Some actually give you the total that you need. One thing to keep in mind, this is the total that is reported to the IRS. There may be a section on your 1099-B that includes proceeds not reported to the IRS. We don't care about that. We just want the information reported to the IRS, because that's what we're going to compare with in TradeLog. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that amount for this account, and I'm going to then run my 1099 reconciliation report. And this report's going to pop up, and it shows you the calculations that we're doing. We've got the short term from 89.49, the long term. We adjust for any exercised options, any option sales, constructor sales, short trades. All of this is explained in a little more detail here in the text. And then we give you the total that TradeLog is reporting for adjusted sales. And then we give the total that you just entered that your 1099-B says. So in this case, I have a $720 difference, which is because I made a typo when I entered this number. So there's one thing that can cause a discrepancy. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to make sure I enter my number correctly. Okay, I think I got it this time. Maybe I did put it right. I did put it right. Yeah. All right, there we go. So yeah, so we have a $720 difference in here, which means TradeLog is reporting $720 different than my broker is. Yeah, I'm looking at the correct account now. So there's different reasons for that, and sometimes the discrepancy is pretty minor, and so you don't have to worry too much about it. Sometimes it's major. We give notes here on how to identify that discrepancy. With this particular brokerage account, I've already done that, and I know that the discrepancy has to do with one of my ETFs and how the broker reported it, because they're saying it should not be reported to the IRS on 1099-B, or no, they're saying it should be reported to the IRS, but it didn't need to be reported. Anyways, so you want to identify the reason that you might have a difference, and we give some instructions on how to do that. A lot of times the difference is going to be, fairly minor, maybe a dollar, few dollars. $700 is something you might want to look for, but again, it depends on the volume of trading that you have as well. So we explain more about that in the user guide. And I'm going to go over to my IB account and show you, for example, wrong button. I'm going to click on the checklist button, and I can click on Reconcile 1099B. Again, I want to accept the checklist buttons, and I'm going to get my total, and I'm going to enter that into here, and I'm going to run this report. And this is a little bit bigger report because I have about 6,000 trades in here. So you'll notice out of $16 million in gross sales, I have a $2.74 difference. That's pretty minor. So that's not uncommon because of rounding. So I'm not even going to worry about it with this particular account at all. So, but this is a report you can run. Again, this is not to be sent to the IRS. You can print this out for yourself. You can save a PDF if you want. If there is a discrepancy, just go ahead and go down to the bottom and read the important notes about what the differences mean. And then you can actually check out in the user guide, there's an option, the report doesn't match my 1099. So you can click on that, and it actually goes through some of the scenarios of what may cause differences with your 1099B. So you can check those out if it's something that you want to account for. Now, one thing I want to show you before I move on with this step, if you do not receive a 1099B, at the very top of this box, you can check no 1099B, and that's going to allow you then to proceed and skip this process. So you will have to do that if you don't receive a 1099. That way TradeLog knows that you at least checked this information and you went through the process correctly. This is important before we go on to the next step, which is actually ending the tax year. So I want to go to my checklist. I'm going to go ahead and check off that I reconciled the 1099. I'm going to go to my Fidelity account. I'm going to do the same. I reconciled the 1099 once I've done that. And that brings us now to step 6, which is ending the tax year, creating the next year file. So what's very important with this is you need to make sure that those 2 checklists I showed you, or the checklist for each account, has been completed. If you have 20 accounts, you need to go through that checklist with each of your accounts, because that's going to make sure that everything is ready for you to end the tax year. Now, when we talk about ending the tax year, this process is important because it finalizes your 2016 tax year, and it's going to create your 2017 tax year file. So that's important. Now, one of the things I want to mention, a little tip, I strongly recommend previewing your tax reports before you actually end the tax year. And that's going to give you an idea if there's something that's like really off or something that you're concerned about. You can do the preview first, and then you'll be able to check and see if everything looks correctly. Let me go here and show you real quick. So I can go to the reports menu and I can view the tax reports. For example, I'm going to run the form 8949, and I'm just going to do this for my individual account. I'm going to get a warning message telling me that my final reporting needs to be done for all accounts, and I'm also going to be told that this is a draft because I haven't finalized. So that's all okay. You'll notice it has a draft watermark in the back. It's not final reporting. But what this allows me to do is look at my totals to make sure that the taxable gain and loss and the actual gain and loss are what I expected. You know, if something's really off and you go, whoa, there's no way, that doesn't look right. Well, you want to go ahead and fix it before you end the tax year. So that's why I suggest doing a preview of those reports before you move on. And you can also kind of verify that trades are reported in the correct sections. So on your 8949, your broker may have, on the 1099B, they might have broken things up in different sections. Basically, previewing, it lets you take a look at everything. Now, if you're mark-to-market, if you preview, you can't really preview your mark-to-market reporting because you have to run the end tax year process. But you can go ahead and look at your gain and loss just to see if it looks correct. Again, it's just a way to make sure there's not something totally off. If you're, $10,000, $20,000 off, hopefully you have some idea of how much money you made or lost in the tax year. Well, that's going to help you kind of know, oh, I better go back and check, maybe there's a problem somewhere. Because once you end the tax year, it's going to lock up the data file. And you can go back and you can change things later if you need to, but we're just going to save you some steps by following that tip. So going back over to TradeLog, I'm going to just go ahead and show you, close out of here. We're going to go to the File menu, and we're going to choose In Tax Year, Create Next Tax Year Data File. Now, it asked me if I want to enter my Social Security number because, again, it's going to lock the file. I'm going to go ahead and click No because I don't want to enter it. And yes, I want to continue. It's also going to give me some reminders, just making sure I did actually complete everything. I imported all of my trade history. I do that. And now it creates my 2017 file. First, it's going to run through all these calculations and it says year-end processing is complete. So now I could actually go and I'm going to find, if I go in the menu, I can find 2017 file is listed. But I'm going to stay in my 2016 because now I want to go on to the next year. You'll notice you can't edit any records. So if you go in here and you're trying to edit, all of that's locked out because we don't want you to accidentally make a change that's going to affect your tax reporting later. If you made a mistake and you need to undo this, you can go up and unlock your file and reverse the end tax year. But then you want to go through the whole process of running end tax year again. That's something we explain again in the user guide. And I'll go to the end of those instructions. And that brings us to step 7, which is generating your tax reports. So a few key things that I want to mention about generating your tax reports is you want to do this from the All Accounts tab when you're generating your final tax reporting. Go up to the Reports menu, and you can run whatever reports apply for you. Form 8949, which is used with Schedule D. If you're filing state, you can use the Gain and Losses report. I had Section 1256 contracts, so I'm going to need to run that report for Form 6781. Some of these other reports may apply if you had mark-to-market, or if you chose, for example, these are for Form 1065. So this is if you're an entity. But also the mark-to-market, if you had a mark-to-market account, that's going to apply as well. So these are all the tax reports that you can generate. So you can go ahead and go in and generate the reports that you need. I'm going to give you a few tips when it comes to the Form 8949 because that's what most of you are going to be using. If I run that report, of course, if I did enter a Social Security number, I can check the box here if I want to include that on the report. It's going to include a statement explaining differences. I'll show you in a moment what this statement is. This checkbox is only used if I know there's other errors on my 1099-B. Again, you can click on what's this and we'll tell you details about that particular function. But if you're planning on e-filing or you're going to be sending this to your CPA, I mean, just about everyone e-files nowadays, it seems. One of the nice features in TradeLog is this checkbox to create Form 8949.pdf. This is an attachment PDF that you can use for e-filing, and it includes the pertinent information. So if I check that and I run the report, it's going to take a minute because it needs to generate all of my calculations. What it's going to do is then ask me to save my 8949 report as a PDF. So I can choose where I want to save that. It's going to export all of that, and it's going to create that PDF. So make sure and put it where you can find it. And you can use that later. I'm going to show you in step 8 when it comes to filing taxes how you can use that PDF. So that's generated, and then TradeLog will generate a preview here. Now the typical 8949 report, when you run it, if you don't check that box, it's going to include another page. Well, there's going to be 2 pages I want to show you. I know we're at our 5:30 mark. We're going to run just a little bit overtime on this. I knew we were going to use all of our time. But at the very end are 2 pages in here. One page that we include is an instruction sheet, and this gives you the totals, and it just makes it easier to fill out your Schedule D. So when you get to that process, you can actually use the totals here to put on your Schedule D, or if you are using software like TurboTax, TaxAct, or some other e-file software, when it asks for your totals, you can get it from this page. This page does not go to the IRS. So that's why we created that Form 8949 PDF, because that PDF doesn't include this page. The IRS, this isn't an IRS form, they don't want it. At the end of the report is another page that you can include and send to the IRS, and it is included with the PDF we create. And this is a statement that explains differences in your tax reporting with what the IRS might see on your 1099-B. So if they were to flag and say, well, your 1099-Bs look different than what you reported on 8949, this statement explains to them some particular things about your situation. For example, I traded both stocks and options. There's IRS rules that apply to me that don't apply to brokers on 1099-B. I also have multiple taxable accounts, so I have different rules that apply to me than they do my brokers. There's also short sales. There's some other situations as well that may apply. So that's something that you can send to the IRS. So I wanted to show you that. Again, there's a whole lot more information we can talk about with tax reports, and these are explained in our user guide, as well as on our website. We explain each of the tax reports, how they're used, and what the information is. So once we've generated our reporting, again, an important thing to remember is to do that from the All Accounts tab, because that's going to include all of your trade activity together. If you run it on the individual accounts, you're not going to get wash sale adjustments across accounts, all of that thing. Now, one thing I want to suggest, a tip as well, best practice, save copies of your reports in maybe just a PDF, or if you really want to print out all 300 pages in my case, you can, but just make a PDF and save it for your personal records. Sometimes users will say, well, it's all in TradeLog, I can run it again later, but what if something happened to your TradeLog file? Well, having the PDF of your report may be very helpful. And one of the things I suggest as well is to run the wash sales details report. That doesn't go to the IRS, but it's a good report to save a copy of just for your records in case if years later you need to go back and see exactly where a wash sale adjustment came from. Going to step 8, we're going to talk about filing your taxes. I'm just going to go through real quick. We do give tips in our user guide. I'll pull that up real quick. In the user guide under step 8, we link to specific instructions whether you're going to e-file or whether you're going to use other methods for filing. And we do talk about the Form 8453 method. We also give some instructions for Tax Act and TurboTax. I want to mention when it comes to e-filing, 2 things that are suggested. Number 1, if your e-file solution allows you to upload a PDF, that's the best way to e-file. Alternatively, they may allow you to mail a printed copy of your report with Form 8453. These are best to use. Some users ask about, well, can I import all of the details from TradeLog into, say, Tax Act or TurboTax? And we do have some reports that you can save and import, but it's very problematic for most users. So if you have more than like 100 trades, I would definitely not do it. In fact, most of those programs don't even allow you to import if you have more than a few hundred trades. The best way to e-file is to upload the PDF. I know, for example, Tax Act, they allow you to do that. You can simply enter the totals from your Form 8949, and we give you the total sheet that I showed you earlier. You enter that into Tax Act, and then you can attach the PDF statement, and they will send that with your e-file. So if the IRS really wants to see all the details from your Form 8949, they can look at it if they want to. It's in the PDF. They probably don't look at that unless they're going to audit you or something later, and that's not very common. So that's why we recommend using that method. If you're using a CPA or you're using a tax preparer, ask them if they can use the Form 8949 PDF. You can send that to them, or you can just create other copies of your reports. Electronic is the way to go. So if you can, use the PDF versions, and you can just take that straight from TradeLog, send it to your CPA or your tax preparer, and they can utilize that. So those are a few tips, and like I mentioned, in our user guide, we kind of go into some more details with different tax software solutions, how to file, how to use the PDF and the 8453 methods. If you have problems, you can always contact us for support. Finishing up, just a few best practices. Before you're done, maybe you finish your tax report and you think, hey, I'm done. I'm not going to touch this again for another year. Well, a couple things I'm going to suggest. Back up your TradeLog file. Both the 2016 and the new 2017 file that were created, go ahead and back them up, and don't just save your backup on your computer, because if your computer crashes, that won't do you any good. So save a copy of your backups to an external location or put it on the cloud. Also, those 2016 tax reports, you're going to save a PDF of those for yourself. Back those up as well. You might put them in the same location. That way, if your computer crashes, and it does happen sometimes, that way you can restore that information. Another tip is to use TradeLog all year long. We know you went through the tax reporting process and you don't want to mess with that for a while, but if you check out some of the features of TradeLog, you can actually utilize it for performance reports and tools throughout the year. And the next tax year is going to be a whole lot easier if you use TradeLog throughout the year, because you can keep importing maybe weekly or monthly, and that's going to keep your trade history up to date. And then you're a lot less likely to have major errors with your trade history. I showed you today I imported 6,000 some trades. I'm going to tell you I was actually cheating a little bit, because personally I do that through the year. I'm going to import at least once a month, import my trade history, make any adjustments that may have happened if there was any stock splits, things like that. It's a whole lot easier when you're dealing with thousands of trades to do that throughout the year, at least once a month, sometimes maybe even weekly. We've got some of you who I know do it daily. So that's just a best practice tip. Now finally, we went through this whole process, and I'm sure all of you were able to get that down pat just perfectly, right? You're not going to have any problems. Well, the reality is you may have some problems come up, and we don't want you to get frustrated. We want you to get support. So for best results, use the Get Support button in TradeLog to start your support request. I'm going to show you where that is if you've never used it before. Open your TradeLog file that you're having a problem with, and go ahead and click the Get Support button. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate a support request. You can type the details here of what your problem is, and you can also, it's going to attach your TradeLog data file automatically. It's going to include any import history, and you can also choose now to attach a statement. So if you're having problems with your 1099-B and you need help with that and you just can't figure it out, well, go ahead and click Attach Statement, and then go ahead and click this box to browse and find your statement, a PDF, CSV, whatever it is. You can attach that additional statement, and then you can go ahead and send this to us. And yeah, you have to put more than 6 words, so I'm going to just cancel out of that. So once you send that, it's going to send all the information that our support team needs to see your problem. They can look at the file, they can look at the problem, if they need to look at the attached statement, then they'll reply by email, and they can give you the instructions and the steps that you need to move on and to get past the problem. If you can't open your TradeLog file, or you just want to go online and check out our support options, you can do that. Go to TradeLogSoftware.com/support, or anywhere on our website, just go to the support menu and do Start Here First. And this gives you all the resources online, our user guide, how TradeLog works, our tutorials, our webinars, and you can also click the Get Support Now button. So that's going to take you to our online support request. So maybe you can't get TradeLog to open up. Maybe it crashed or something. You could submit an online support request, and we'll reply by email to that. Or you can email us directly at support@TradeLogSoftware.com. This time of year is very, very busy. You can give us a phone call, but you're probably going to have to leave a voicemail, and we'll return your call as soon as possible. But we really recommend start by using the Get Support button. And that way, if we need to call you and walk you through it, we can. But first, we can see the problem, and we can try to really get you the specific help you need. So that brings us to an end of our webinar. We went a little bit over time. I knew we probably would. That's why, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had to limit the Q&A. And I know some of you have posted questions that we haven't been able to answer. I strongly recommend contacting our support team directly if you did not get your question answered, and they will try to answer that question. I am sorry that we weren't able to get to as many questions, but like I said, we had a very large audience with us today and a lot of material to cover. You can go back and check out the recording of this webinar. We're going to send you that link as soon as it's posted on our YouTube channel, and that way you can follow through some of these steps. But most importantly, don't forget to use the quick start guide in TradeLog. Follow along with those steps as you're using the software, because we really do explain a lot of details, and even if some of the problems that might come up or errors, we explain those as well. So use those features, but don't be afraid to contact us too if you need support or you need help. Finally, I want to show you our webinars page. as soon as I can pull that up. So if you go to our support, click start here first, you can go to webinars, or you can just do tradelogsoftware.com/webinars. And here you're going to find upcoming webinar events as well as the archive of our past webinar recordings. So you can check out the recording will be posted here, but you can also check out previous events that we've had as well if you want to learn more about how to use TradeLog. And we also have some various webinars about wash sales, about how to use TradeLog all year long and get more benefits out of it. So check those out as well. And we do look forward to having you with us on a future webinar event. Thank you very much for attending today, and I hope everyone has a fantastic evening.